who seeks jobs. Job is sought by people who are supposed to be independent,
What does real inclusion look like in practice beyond policies, beyond hiring numbers? What are the first 3 steps any company can take today?
Meaningful inclusion would be to provide reasonable accommodation in every sense, not just in hiring practices. Even the interview for hiring needs to have reasonable accommodation. A big gap is because there are very few people living with autism who are advocating for their own needs in terms of livelihood. If society looks at people with autism as people, with whom you cannot talk, with whom you can't give instructions and they will follow. If the mindset is such, then they are not seen as employable. They are seen as people who will be difficult employees. And nobody wants difficult employees.
What if I told you that most companies that claim to be inclusive are actually excluding people every single day? And when it comes to autism in India, the problem is not just about misunderstanding. It's a complete disconnect between intent and reality. Welcome to today's episode of the India Autism Center podcast. Today's conversation won't be that comfortable because we are not going to discuss theory. We're going to discuss reality. Hi, I'm Rick Chakraborty. I'm your host, and today to guide us through this all, we're honored to have Dr. Nandini Ghosh. She is an assistant professor and a leading scholar in the field of disability and gender studies. She holds a PhD in social sciences from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences and has spent years researching lived experiences of marginalized communities, especially people with disabilities. Ma'am, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, for the first question that I have for you, from your experience, how would you define the difference between tokenistic inclusion and meaningful inclusion in employment?
Okay, so in India, we have if you see till now, we have a lot of legal provisions regarding inclusion of disabled people in different aspects of life.
Right.
So whether it's education, whether it's work, whether it's community living. So we have, by law, we have these provisions. But I think most of it is tokenistic. A lot of this, it is tokenistic because we are just including disabled people in name only. We are not able to provide that kind of a context, that kind of reasonable accommodation that is required for a range of persons with disabilities. And that is why it is tokenism. So you'll see these special recruitment drives.
Yes.
Okay, where you have SCST, like nowadays you have hiring for persons with disabilities. Right. Or people will write in their advertisement that we are inclusive, please apply. We encourage people, women, persons with disabilities to apply. Up to that point, it is okay. And that is where the tokenism starts and ends. But when you actually hire someone, you have to make the space accommodative for diverse needs. And that is what we are talking about when we are talking about disability. Diverse needs in terms of how people engage with other people, how people engage with the context they are in, how people engage with the responsibilities that they are given. And that is why meaningful inclusion would be to provide reasonable accommodation in every sense. Not just in hiring practices, even the interview for hiring needs to have reasonable accommodation. If someone is not able to vocalize, what alternate means of communication do we provide to a person to prove that they are fit for the job that they are applying for?
Right.
Once they come in, what kind of accommodation are we providing to, say, people who are disturbed by sounds? People who are not able to establish social relations as anybody else. What happens to people who are not able to, say, adapt to very high paced work? Do we therefore leave them out? So, meaningful inclusion would be to bring in a lot of people with diverse needs and accommodate their diverse needs in varied ways. And if a company wants to do it, if the government wants to do it, it can be done. It's not impossible.
Right, right. So, just to follow up on this, is tokenism sometimes unintentional or is it often systemic?
Tokenism seems unintentional, but it is often systemic. And why it is systemic is because we allow tokenism because of our attitudes, the social attitudes that we have largely towards disability, and specifically over the years, we have, for some of the physical disabilities, we have still evolved ways of accommodating.
Yeah.
But when we come to these categories of intellectual disability, of autism spectrum disorder, of multiple disabilities, we still have that mindset that says that these are people who cannot do anything. These are people who have a disability. Therefore, what we really are looking at is systemic barriers. Because, why I'm saying it is systemic? Because the way you have structured your recruitment policies is something systemic. The way you have structured the interview process is something systemic. The way you have structured your HR, and even when they come in, when new employees come in, you do a what's the term for it, the onboarding.
Yeah.
That is also a structured process.
Right.
So these are all systemic barriers that prevent inclusion of people, again, with diverse disabilities.
Before we continue, we would like to have a small announcement for our viewers. To mark the 10th anniversary of our RPwD Act, we are hosting a special Instagram live session on the 17th of July, that is Friday, at 5 p.m. to discuss this and also some other important disability issues. So we would really love for you to be there. To go there to know more about that, just scan the QR on your screen right now or click the link in the description given below. So to continue our podcast, why do you think autism in particular is poorly understood in Indian workspaces compared to some other disabilities like you were just mentioning right now? So is it because it challenges traditional workplace norms more deeply?
So before I go to workplace, I think autism in particular is not well understood in this country. And one of the reasons for it is that, I mean, the disability struggle has been a long struggle.
Yes.
And in this struggle, people with the more visible kind of disabilities have been able to articulate their needs and put it forward as demands and claim space for themselves. Now, any movement becomes successful when people are able to do so.
Yes, yes.
In case of autism, what is happening? To be able to vocalize what are their needs, to be able to put forward what are their demands, is very difficult for people living with autism.
Yeah.
For people who find it difficult to establish contact with others, who find it difficult to, say, articulate their inner thoughts and the frustrations that they have. In this case, therefore, for people on the spectrum, it has been the parents who have taken it forward mostly.
Right, right.
Who seeks jobs? Job is sought by people who are supposed to be independent, able to work for themselves. And so if parents are articulating the needs for people who are seeking employment, these are not seen as people who deserve to be employed. So a big gap is because there are very few people living with autism who are advocating for their own needs in terms of livelihood. The second barrier is, again, I go back to the point of social attitudes. If society looks at people with autism as people who with whom you cannot talk, with whom you can't give instructions and they will follow. If the mindset is such, then they are not seen as employable. They
Yes.
are seen as people who will be difficult employees. And nobody wants difficult employees. People want people to be amenable, to follow instructions, do what is being said, and not do anything that is not in a straitjacket. So this is where I think there is very little discussion about uh, persons living with autism in structured employment. Yes, we are all talking about people with autism in supported employment, in individual entrepreneurship initiatives, etc. That is very individualized, but
Yes.
not within the system. So there is very little discussion, and primarily because I think autism spectrum disorder is not understood clearly.
Yes. Yes.
Also,
So,
the fact that it is a spectrum.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you don't know exactly what capabilities are being brought to the table.
Right.
And you assume a lot about the incapabilities. I mean, that happens with most disabilities, but I think particularly with autism spectrum disorder, this is something that happens most often.
If you're watching this and finding it helpful, please click like and subscribe. On paper, India has progressive disability policies, but where do they fall apart in real implementation?
Yes, I mean, India always has had very good policies, laws, but they fall apart in implementation primarily because of the lack of initiative of the state and of the private players. And I would put the blame more on the state, because unless the state puts pressure on the private players,
Yeah.
it is not going to happen.
True.
So, if the state says that any private company that is hiring has to mandate this percent reservation, they have a reservation policy, okay, that 4% jobs. But the state itself is violating that. So if the state itself is violating it, how can it call on the private players to adhere to the reservation policy? So one is the violation by the state itself in the implementation. Second is the lack of will of the state to put pressure on private entities to hire persons with autism. And this happens, I think, primarily again because the state is not a formless entity. The state is populated by people like you and me,
Yeah.
people from society who have this idea that people with autism are really difficult. So if I think someone is difficult, if I think someone is incapable, I am never going to promote their employment. It is the state and the private entities who do not want to employ difficult people. People want amenable people, people who will listen to them and keep quiet,
Yeah.
or be part of the larger pattern, not be outside the pattern. So therefore, despite us having very good policies, laws, despite us having the UNC convention for persons with disabilities as a guideline to enhance livelihood opportunities, we hardly have anything. And I am saying that I think you have to make this difference, that livelihood opportunities and employment are two different things.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about employment, we are talking about structured. But even if you look at livelihood opportunities, is the is the state telling the banks that you have to give loans to persons with autism who want to start their own business?
Yeah.
So there are no directives like that. So that is where the problem is. The problem is in the intent, not in the legal framework that is there. You have to actually apply that legal framework with the intent, and that is what is missing in India.
It's very well put, ma'am. Many companies claim to be inclusive. What are the biggest gaps between what they say and what actually happens, which is close to the points we were discussing now? What would you ask a company to prove their inclusion is real?
But again, as I have already mentioned, the gap is in understanding what are the needs.
Yes.
Because when we hear disability, we assume automatically certain kinds of needs. So when you say disability inclusion or access, everybody says, oh, we have a ramp.
Mhm.
Now there is a ramp. Sometimes it is of the right gradient, sometimes it is not. Sometimes it's at the back of the building because it was built later. So, which means you are putting a separate entrance for your employees. Yes, that a lot of disability activists have fought for. But what if a person with autism does want to come in through a separate entrance? Because the main entrance is milling with people and they do not want. So, is that option offered? My point is, how you have to speak to each employee with disability to find out what their requirements are and then to provide the enabling environment in which they can work to their potential. For any company who is looking to employ persons with autism, the first thing is get to know the person, get to know what their needs are, and then think proactively how you can accommodate those needs. Because the way in which you accommodate the needs becomes the inclusion, meaningful inclusion that we were talking about.
Right, right. So, just following up on this, you meant to say that the company has to understand the person maybe one on one before deciding what he or she exactly needs. So, do you mean to say that the company should focus more on an inclusive onboarding process where, the company can itself get to know what the requirements are?
Yes, definitely. A inclusive onboarding process. See, companies do onboarding.
Yeah.
And company HR department does it one-on-one only, right?
Yes, yes.
To a certain extent before they try to explain to them what are the systems. And if there is a batch coming in, then they do it in a batch basis.
Yeah.
But usually it's a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
Then you accommodate a person there. You put, say, 5 additional questions about access needs, about accommodation needs. You talk to maybe if you are aware that the person has autism, then you talk to, say, the larger ecosystem that person has. Maybe the family or an organization that has sent the person, and to try to find how to accommodate this person with autism.
Right, right.
That is the way they will retain the employee.
Yes.
Otherwise, there will be dropout, or they will work for a few months and they will drop out because they don't they find the atmosphere alienating,
Absolutely.
and that is not inclusion. That is just accommodation. That is just tokenistic inclusion in a certain way, where on paper you will show, well, I hired so many persons with disabilities. How many are continuing? 1% maybe.
Before we continue, here's a quick look at who we are at India Autism Center.
Imagine a space designed not just to care for individuals with autism, but to empower them. A place where knowledge grows, support flourishes, and possibilities expand. This is India Autism Center. It is built to redefine how we approach autism. Through education, research, and community-driven initiatives, we create an environment where individuals with autism can thrive. Samavesh, our residential campus, is designed for individuals with autism to live, learn, and grow with dignity and independence. It is more than just a place to stay. It is a space to belong. Manan, our training academy, prepares professionals to provide specialized care. Through structured programs, we equip individuals with the skills to support neurodivergent communities with confidence and compassion. Khoj, our research division, is dedicated to advancing our understanding of autism. Through data-driven studies and collaborative research, we work towards shaping the future of neurodiversity.
There's a common situation that we often come across. Here's an example that I'm sharing. A parent shared this frustration. The teacher refuses to allow noise cancelling headphones or a quiet corner because it's unfair to others. Now, is inclusion being misunderstood here, or are like workspaces designed only for entry, not progression?
I think it begins at school. And teachers also do not understand disability very well, and especially persons with autism, persons with attention deficit disorders. And that is where teachers will not allow these kind of, noise cancelling. They will allow a wheelchair.
Yeah.
They will allow someone with crutches. They will allow someone with hearing aids, because it does not disturb the larger frame of things in the classroom.
Right.
Also, given the fact that most of our education is the oral method,
Yeah.
and now we are adding parts of it visual. So the teacher thinks that by using noise cancelling headphones, the child will not hear at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so there is a lot of sensitization required at school level. There is a lot of sensitization required. There's a lot of accommodation required at school level, and I think I want to stress this. We need to do it with the children. Because if a child grows up seeing a classmate wearing a noise cancelling, they understand the situation better. When they join the HR of some company,
Yes.
they are able to accommodate it much better.
Absolutely.
We say children are very cruel, but we also know children are the most adaptable.
Yeah.
So if the problem is now, the generation that is hiring now has not seen a autistic child ever in their life, or an autistic adult ever in their life. So they don't know how to handle this person. But if you have grown up with someone like that, you've seen someone in your everyday life, then accommodation becomes easier. So we need to create these examples. We need to ensure that more and more children are going to inclusive schools, are following an inclusive pattern of education, not just for the disabled child, but also for the other classmates who then become sensitized about disability.
Absolutely. I've heard that empathy is a skill which can be learned, and I feel these practices of inclusion can actually instill in empathy in children from a very young age.
Exactly.
And that is what you were mentioning, like when they grow up later on and become HRs, that empathy comes handy later on in
Definitely.
life.
They learn accommodation, and they learn the practical aspects of accommodation at
Absolutely.
school level. Someone needs to be helped to the bathroom. Someone needs someone maybe to help with the faucets that are there.
Right.
These are very small things, but
Absolutely. So, what happens to autistic adults who fall through the cracks after schooling ends? And are families carrying the burden alone?
see, the whole point is about autism is the fact that there is hardly any data. So uh, we have a rough figure of, say, 1.8 crores of persons with autism in India.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a gross figure. But you ask me how many children with autism are going to school? There is no data. How many children with disability have exited school in the last 1 year? There is no data. So I think that this is a very invisible group, and they are primarily being managed by the parents, and to a certain extent in urban areas by the organizations that provide some kind of support, if they have managed to reach some kind of organization. So yes, so therefore the stress level on the parents is very, very high, because they hardly have any other means to help them develop their children. Knowledge about autism is still partial. Strategies of working with young adults with autism are also, they are in silos. They are not spread across the country. They are not known to everybody. They are not commonly known to even the school teachers. Therefore, it's the parents who are managing most of it. Now, there are options like the National Open School, and children are sitting for exams. They are passing those exams. But after that, what? If you look for vocational training, again, it's a very minuscule people who are living in urban areas who are maybe able to access some kind of training. vocational training, which
Yeah.
can move them towards livelihood. If the parents are well off, they will support some livelihood. But what happens to the larger group of children with autism who come from poor backgrounds, who are living in rural areas? So that is where the gap is. And parents are absorbing most of it, whether rural, whether urban, parents are absorbing most of it, except for that, again, maybe a 2% of the families that are able to access services from organizations working with children and young adults with autism.
So we are coming to the last question of our podcast. This is a deeper question. I feel the deepest of all these questions. What does real inclusion look like in practice beyond policies, beyond hiring numbers? What are the first 3 steps any company can take today?
Real inclusion, I think, means accommodating the specific needs of people that companies are hiring. And it has happened, it's not impossible. It has already happened with, say, women. There are a lot of changes made to facilitate employment of women.
Absolutely.
So, it's not something that cannot be done. It can be done. But if you ask me three main changes, I would say that when you hire, you get to know the person, get to know their needs, and try to accommodate that to the extent possible. And actually, what COVID has done to us is a good thing, because work from home might suit a lot of people with autism,
Absolutely, yeah.
So, could that be a policy if someone prefers it?
Yeah.
That someone works from home and comes in only one day of the week. So that is what responding to the need of the person, to the condition of the person, and trying to accommodate them, but not creating exclusion in another way. So if so what I'm trying to say is trying to include in diverse ways, but also not trying to, okay, so someone, I have given you a job, you can sit at home.
Yeah, yeah.
No. The point is you do your work at home and then you come once a week for meetings, which is then makes the person feel part of the organization that is employing you.
Right.
So it is these kind of accommodations. Can we also build specifically for autism, accommodations like, quiet time, fatigue, because they feel a lot of fatigue if they are around a lot of other people. Maybe fine tune your policies of how meetings will happen. Maybe, make modifications to how content is to be delivered. So I think companies, depending on the industry that they are part of, because it's not, again, a uniform thing, need to rethink how they will include other people. And I mean, this is not a autism specific example, but I'll tell you, because I work with other disabilities also. So locomotor disability, person with cerebral palsy gets a job in sector 5 here, starts from Behala to sector 5 is a long journey.
Yeah, of course.
Somehow manages to reach, but every day struggles with opening the heavy glass door because he has crutches. So what could have been the accommodation here? So there should have been some accommodation for this particular person who was forced to leave that job after 6 or 8 months because couldn't struggle through this every day. And this I'm talking about a person with cerebral palsy. For a person with autism who is unable to vocalize also the fact that something is disturbing them, there should be someone who is thinking a little bit more about accommodation, about inclusion. So that is what a company needs to do. HR needs to have trained people looking at the diversity of needs.
Absolutely. And do you think it has also to do something related to monitoring. Like the monitoring mechanisms should also be in place. Like how do you even understand what a person is going through unless you can monitor that where he or she is facing those problems?
Definitely. But monitoring can't be only through data, and that is what I want to stress.
Yes.
Because all our monitoring, unfortunately, is, how many people were employed,
Yeah.
how many men, women. So we do only through data monitoring. This kind of monitoring, inclusion monitoring, cannot be through data. It has to be hands-on.
Yes.
Maybe if industry itself has a monitoring body, they can promote that. So can we have all our, say, the business councils that we have, can we have someone there who is then implementing inclusion at the policy level through across all industries? Can they help support processes of inclusion? So, I mean, we have to think out of the box, no? Because if we are looking at one company, we are thinking, how will this person? But if the business council itself has a policy of inclusion, then it has to be percolated down, and the monitoring is done by the business council itself.
Absolutely, yeah. This conversation reminds us that inclusion, it's not just about adding people to an existing system. It is redefining those systems so that everyone belongs. And if this conversation made you rethink inclusion, share it, start a discussion. Because change, though it starts with awareness, it is actually driven by action. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. And thank you to you all for joining us as well. There are ADL sheets, ADL worksheets available on our website for free. You can download it by checking the link in the description. Do check it out.